Everybody here comes from different business types, businesses that deal directly with customers face to face and consumers, some it's behind the scenes. And so the payment landscape is changing, and it's changing for each of you, but all differently. So we're hoping that by spending the time today, we're going to navigate through those changes with EMV. What is it? What does it mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for you as a consumer? What does it mean for you as a business owner? And how are you going to navigate through those changes? There's a lot of information out there. We can certainly provide some, but we're hoping that by spending this time today, we're going to help you kind of navigate through that. We're going to be your advisors. We're going to be able to help you work through that. What's going to work for you? What isn't going to work for you? There's positives and negatives to all different changes, and this one is no different. There's some good things. Maybe there's some things for your business that aren't great. And we're going to kind of hopefully work through those, help you decide what do you need to do. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Corey Corder. He's going to be talking about the subject matter. And then we've left a lot of time at the end for questions. Those can be questions for the whole group or questions at the end that you really want to just kind of say, what about this for me? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Corey.
Good afternoon, y'all. Hope y'all had a great day, and try not to take a whole lot of time, but hopefully it'll be beneficial to you all, and thank you for coming. Like I said, like Deetra mentioned, the topic is going to be EMV, as you all know. And so you may wonder, what is EMV? And that is EuroPay MasterCard Visa. And it has that name, EuroPay, because the technology began in Europe, and that is slowly transitioning over to the US, and come October 1st, that is whenever it will all take into effect here. What an EMV chip, it's a chip-enabled card that is capable of to where you're not using the same 16-digit card number everywhere you go. If you go to 5 different places in one day and use your chipped card, that chip will generate a unique number for each location that you go to. And so on the consumer side, the way that benefits you all is that at those 5 different places, if for instance, if one business, if Target were to get breached again and you all had been there, you won't have to get a new card, worry about your identity being out there, because that number is a unique value that is only going to be used one time. And so that your card number getting out there is not at jeopardy. And then also the fraudsters, they're always, hackers and fraudsters are always very good. If you find out something, they're going to figure out a way to break it just like criminals. And so, but the one thing about the chip, where it is unique, it can't be skimmed, imprinted, scan a card, get the 16-digit number and make that on a magnetic strip. With that chip, you cannot do that. It is embedded in the card, and it's pretty much impossible for them to be able to recreate that chip. And for your businesses, as you all own your own business or run your business, it benefits everybody because the consumers have fewer reasons that they may be hesitant or worried about their cards getting out in your system, whether you process mobily on a phone, use a terminal, or process through a software, POS, through a computer system. Using that chip-enabled technology, it will benefit everybody. Another thing it benefits is the reduction in card fraud from counterfeit and lost and stolen. As it's EuroPay, like I mentioned, it originated in Europe, and in the UK, 2009, they fell by a quarter, which that was the first year that it was implemented fully over there. And so that's what the card industry is hoping to be able to achieve in the US as well. And the counterfeit card fraud, it fell by a half, which is astronomical. And that all is attributed to people not being able to replicate a card. And then the lost and stolen cards, it's at the lowest level in 10 years, and they like to attribute all of that to the EMV technology as well. And also, if you all have any questions at any point, feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, and we can address that while it's fresh on your mind. And this is a picture of a chipped card. How many of you all here today have a chipped card already currently? So quite a few. And so have y'all used them at Walmart or Food City or anywhere where you've got to insert it? So you're familiar with it? Well, for a few years to come, the cards will both have magnetic strips and a chip, also with the numbers on the front as well. Gas stations, they've got an extra year before they have to. It's mandatory for them to upgrade to be able to accept chipped cards. They've got until October of 16. And so for that reason, there's going to be a lot of cards out there that will have both. And also there's going to be a lot of businesses that may not decide to upgrade to accept the chip technology for their own various reasons. But by swiping an EMV chipped card, you do not use that technology and that added security that card has. And so it kind of defeats the purpose of that, but that is some businesses, like I mentioned, that may not have that, and so we've got to have the magnetic strip on there. And so like I mentioned, it's all pretty, as business owners, whenever you take a card, you can tell it's pretty noticeable that it's a chipped card. They kind of stand out. And so of course, as more consumers begin getting cards, you'll start seeing more and more of the chipped cards. And then what businesses does the EMV affect? It affects just about every business except businesses that take cards over the phone, through a website, anything that's not face-to-face, because restaurants and retail, it's all a card-present environment, and so it does not affect the card not present because they're either keying, the customer is keying in a card, or you're receiving a card over the phone and keying that card into a terminal or an online-based system as well. So that's where it does not affect the MOTO, which is mail order or telephone order environments. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, EMV takes effect October 1st, and that is something that's not a federal mandate. The government doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's all the card brands. So like your Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. American Express has had chips on their cards for many years now, just because they have a lot of world travelers and a lot of businesses will have their business card with American Express, and so it offers their card holders a little bit more security. But if your business accepts and processes a counterfeit transaction, this is where the liability shifts on October 1st from right now. If there's any kind of fraudulent cards, stolen cards, anything of that nature, if your business takes a card, it will, Visa, the banks, they accept that liability and will make sure that your business still gets the money. After October 1st, that's flipped. And so what that means is that if I go to your business and you do not have a chip-enabled terminal and I have a chipped card, for some reason it's stolen and it gets swiped there, it's swiped at your business on a non-chip terminal, and my card number gets jeopardized, all of that liability, if you have a whole batch of credit cards, say 30 people in one day, or it could be 3,000 people, and each person runs up a small amount on each credit card, that is all solely coming out of the business's account. You're liable for all of that. So it's kind of like upgrading to the machine is kind of like an insurance policy. You know, you're spending a little bit up front to make sure that it's not very, very costly in the long run. And like I mentioned, there's no fine associated with not accepting EMV cards. Some businesses may choose not to, but you're accepting that risk. And that risk could be very minuscule, or it could be very costly enough to shut your business down. And so that is all your decision. We're not making you do it. We're just going to make sure that you all know the pros and cons about the reasons why you would like to. For mail order or telephone order environments, for card not present environments, you're keying a card in on a terminal, a computer, or something like that. That card's not present, and so you're going to be able to get as much information as you need. your address, the CVV code on the back, a zip code, all of that information to make sure that it is the person's card that they say it is, okay? But you're not actually swiping a card or anything like that. You're not seeing a card. So then in that scenario, you'll be just fine processing through an online-based system or keying it in on your terminal, however you'd like to do. And so it does not affect that realm of processing.
Corey, on that point, maybe something else he was trying to get to was whose risk is it?
Yeah, that's
I think that's a question.
Yeah, that's
If it's fraudulent, then the processors will still pick that up. The processors, the card manufacturers.
That stays as it is.
Yeah, that stays as it is. It's only affecting face-to-face card present. Okay. And then this is a little bit better definition of the liability shift. A non-compliant merchant is liable for fraud that occurs on any chipped card used on a magnetic swiped terminal. The liability for the chargeback or fraud is solely belonging to the merchant. And then this also applies to issuers as well. Your Visas, MasterCards, anybody that issues a card. If they are issuing a swiped non-chipped credit card and you use that somewhere, then they're liable for that fraud. Because they're trying to get, the card industry is trying to make sure that on both sides of it, on the consumer, for the issuers and the merchants, that they're both going to be able to accept those cards and people will have those cards to use. And there's multiple types of chipped cards. I'm sure all of you are somewhat familiar, have heard of Apple Pay. And so there's the chipped cards, that's the contact, which most people will have, to where the chip is actually inserted in the machine or terminal and the contact must be made. But then that contactless is something that is pretty new. It's been used for years in access keys to get in gyms or in buildings and hospitals and stuff like that. So it's that same technology. It's just in your card or your cell phone or anything like that, to where the machine is here and you can wave your phone or your card that has that contactless chip in there and the transaction is done. And so that makes it a lot simpler for both parties. Plus, you've got that ability. How many of you all use Apple Pay or have tried to use it? Tom, so that's there's not many people are using it. I'm still a little skeptical of Apple Pay, but that's something that it's in the cards, and so everybody will be able to use that if you've got a contactless card. And this is kind of a picture of how the transaction works. The card is inserted or dipped into the terminal and it is left inside the machine until the machine prompts you to remove that card. And that is very necessary to keep that machine in there until it tells you to remove that. And it is if it is removed beforehand, it will result in a transaction error. And so that's just because the terminal has not been able to gather all of the information that is on that chip. Like I mentioned, the magnetic strip holds a 16-digit code, the 16-digit card number. The chips are embedded with a 128-digit number, and so it's a revolving number each time, going back to where it's a unique value for each transaction. And so it has to gather all of that chip's information and get that in there. And then I've got, here's a little video of the transaction being done, so you all can see this. And at this point, the merchant has just pressed the sale button to begin the transaction. So as you can see, they're entering in the amount and then confirming the dollar amount. And then the card is inserted in the machine. And just like that, the transaction's completed, just like you may normally be processing How many of you all have, I know you all have the new machines. How many else have the machines already upgraded?
We're not using it. That's low.
And some people may experience slower times. Depends on whether you're processing through a phone line or through the internet. Phone lines sometimes will take longer, just as anything. So you went from dial-up on your computers to DSL, everything will speed up.
So the internet connection is fast.
Yes, so that is processed through an internet, and I've got the IP line right here as well. The reason why is just because that transaction, that chip holds so much more. It's running so much more of an in-depth, lengthened transaction that sometimes through the phone line, it can time out because those phone lines will only hold a dial tone for so long. And so that can cause a timeout. And so yes, processing through the internet is strongly recommended. It's much safer because they'll run a PCI, as many of you do your PCI compliance. It will run a scan to make sure that that your network is safe and not vulnerable to any kind of fraud or anybody getting in, because it does an external facing network scan. And so that protects you all to make sure that your transactions are safe, and plus it significantly speeds it up. This is a couple frequently asked questions that we have. Why do we need EMV? If my machine's working perfectly fine right now, why do I need a new one? And it's so you can get the benefit of the new added security technology, which is, everybody likes new security, whether it's for your personal identity or to protect your business. That's the only way that you can stay ahead of that curve, is to be able to take advantage of that technology. That transfer of liability, by not accepting EMV cards, you accept that risk of, if there's a fraudulent card or a chargeback, fraudulent card, anything like that, whether it may be a $5, $10 transaction or a $7,000 transaction on a mower. I mean, it may come back and you're out of pocket. Not only are you out of your product, but you're also out of your cost that you got. So it's kind of, you're getting hit double. If I sell a $500 piece of equipment and then it comes back that card's fraudulent, I'm out that $500 piece of equipment and that $500 that was given to me when they walked out the door. So you're out $1,000. And so that all can be taken care of by just upgrading to a new machine and protecting your business. So much just like the machines, as you can see, y'all can see this, and for people that are using a POS, point of sale device, processing through the computer using QuickBooks or anything like that, where you've just got a magnetic swiper velcroed to the side of your machine or on your desk or something like that, you will be issued, whether through it's your POS company or through your processor, that you may need to get a new upgrade, because this also applies to you because you're in a face-to-face card-present environment. And so it's pretty much just a machine without the paper roll, that as opposed to having a power cord and an Ethernet cord plugged into it, it just has a USB cord. And that swiper that you have currently is plugged into your computer through a USB cord. And so you'll just simply plug that in there. You may have to upload a driver or something to your computer, just like if you're uploading pictures from your digital camera, you've got to put that software on there. So you may have to do that. Some require that, some don't. And so, but yes, ma'am, you still will need to upgrade. And so whether it's, what system do you use right now? QuickBooks, yes, ma'am. And so those were going to an Ingenico terminal. And it's this is a Verifone. And so we also provide both terminals, just depending on what's best for your business. And so for QuickBooks, it's a simple transition. QuickBooks, depending on which version of QuickBooks you run, they're supporting EMV right now. Some are not. they're waiting until July or August just because they're getting all their kinks out on QuickBooks side, you can still upgrade so that way that you've got it, because just as anything goes, as it's closer to the deadline, the price goes up. And so you're more than happy to upgrade now, so that way that whenever your version of QuickBooks or whatever software that is, if you know which pin pad they're going to accept, you can go ahead and upgrade so that way that you're ready, and it may save you half. You never know how much the markups may be whenever it gets closer. Our processor that provides our mobile devices, our swipers, it's called Magtech, is the company that we use of the swipers, and they're triple encrypted. So that just as encrypted as a machine, so you know that they're safe. Your cards aren't being stored on your phone or anything like that. But we will have those within the next 60 days. All of our processors and everybody are trying to hammer down which one they want to use, and so which one they want to make compatible with their system. And so once we know that, we'll know a price on it and which model, but it will more than likely be something very similar to what you may already be using. It may be something that plugs into the bottom of the phone and it has a swiper on the side, because you'll still have to be able to accept magnetic stripped cards. But then underneath the phone, it will have the chip reader. And so you'll be able to accept chip cards, because especially for phones, that's a big risk if they were to open up that door of not upgrading. Well, if you're able to swipe a card, it's much better for you to swipe a card, because any keyed transaction, it has a higher cost to it, because it's still viewed, even if I'm standing right in front of you and you key in my card, on the processor and on Visa, MasterCard, on their viewpoint of it, it's just the same as if I'm in California calling you with a card saying, hey, yeah, this is my card. And so that in their eyes, they view it that same way. And so if you have the opportunity to swipe a card, it is much, much cheaper for you.
Get back to his risk question. If he comes in there and enters it, once we get past the date, if he takes that transaction that way with that person in front of him, he's now liable for fraud. That's what I think that's what he does.
In a sense, it's a kind of a gray area there, because in Visa and the processor's eyes, they're going to have your business set up as a retail business, not a Moto internet-based business. And so
So that's how it's determined?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the processor's going to put you in, whenever a processor boards you, there's a selection of, am I retail? Do I accept cards face-to-face? Am I a retail business? Or is it a mail order, telephone order, or internet business? And so if you don't fall in that category, if you fall in that retail category and something like that were to happen, you're still going to be liable for it. There's going to be exceptions in that realm, because you're still going to have a signature. You're still going to have a signature there. And so there's a lot of gray areas, because we haven't experienced those problems yet. There's kind of, Visa hasn't really given us much of an answer on that.
You just want to make sure you ID.
Yes, I would say that's the biggest thing. Yeah, write down their driver's license number, get something, but just make sure, because if something like that were to happen, I highly doubt that if you ID somebody, unless they've made a fake ID and somebody calls and says, hey, somebody used my card to buy a weed eater, they're going to, and it becomes a chargeback issue, at least you're going to be able to dispute that chargeback by saying, hey, look, I'll fax you a copy of the receipt with the customer's signature on there. It's got their driver's license number on there, just like if you were to accept a check. If anybody pays with a check at Walmart, my grandmother still pays with a check everywhere she goes. And so they always ask for her driver's license and write down her driver's license number, birth date, stuff like that. just in the event of if there were to be an issue. And so I would just take those precautionary steps just to make sure. No, sir, you cannot void a debit card. That's just I guess it's in debit laws.
Right, no, they're always asking debit or credit.
Mm-hmm.
So some cards have dual functions.
Yes, sir. Just as if you have a check card with your checking account, you can go to Walmart and run it as debit, or you can run it as credit.
Well, I think what he's getting is customers saying run that as a debit or credit. So our machine, which is the Verifone, doesn't give you that option. You run through, the machine does what it wants to do with it. It doesn't ask you that question if we don't have the debit thing. So, I mean, I guess you have to ask the customer, can you use this as a debit card?
It can be used as credit. Many years ago, when processors used to do their pricing differently, debit was much cheaper. But now, where pricing is all based off of the cost of the card or interchange, you still benefit from that lower cost of a debit transaction, even though it's ran as credit, because it's still reflecting, that check card is still reflecting off of a debit cost of a card, as opposed of when years ago, when Visa used to have their pricing, it was all done differently. And so you're still, it's a lot. Sometimes it can be more costly for people to accept debit cards if they only accept a few versus a whole lot, because the debit companies that are on the back of your cards will charge $2 to $5 per card brand that you accept. Yeah, some processors didn't really want people to be on process through the internet, because they may not get their customers PCI compliant, which that's something that we always reiterate to the customers. You've got 90 days to get PCI compliance, but always try and do it whenever we first board a customer, and then shoot a follow-up email if we notice that they're not PCI compliant, just so they're not charged for being non-compliant, but also to protect them. And so some processors were reaping the benefits of them charging that fee. And so that's one way that they can kind of protect them from not getting breached, for their customers not getting breached, but then also by not being compliant. And so, but as long as you're PCI compliant, like I mentioned, that external network-facing scan, it makes sure, and most businesses, if you've got a firewall, if you've got a router, most routers have a firewall built into them, and it's as simple as turning that firewall on, and you're fine. And so it's you don't have to have some big IT team come in there and fix everything for you and make it up like Fort Knox or anything. But I mean, as long as you have a firewall, then you will be fine. I had a customer today that they had just got a new modem, weren't sure if it had a firewall on it, and it did. And she emailed me when I was coming up here, said, "Hey, it passed." So.